Tiemensma, and I am very happy to be here today. It's a great honor, I would say. I am a classroom teacher in teacher education, so I am a little nervous. How can I contribute anything to you? But I will try my best. Japan is a major and dominant country in the world. Denmark is a small state in Northern Europe. And so I think you can understand my hesitation. How can a gap between so different countries be productive, innovative? Well, I think one of the areas where we both can benefit from this collaboration is what I would call good strangeness. Something is strange, it's not really sounding so nice. And therefore, I like this German concept of good strangeness. It means we're not aliens to each other, and we're not too familiar to each other. So in between alienness and familiarity, I think there is something we could call good strangeness. And in this, I hope we can see things we wouldn't be able to understand if we didn't have each other. And in this way, we can change our concepts. I know we all need to change some basic concept in order to cope with a more sustainable future. So where do I come from? Well, Denmark is a tax-financed welfare state, and all citizens are supported from cradle to grave. So when a child needs a new broken tooth repaired or a broken leg repaired, well, then that is taken care of just as well as education. And education is free from primary till PhD. And I think this way of thinking really has to be connected strongly with a society wanting more equality. After World War II, it became very important to develop a social welfare state, and education, you can say, have been one of the main resources in this development toward more equality in society. And I think when you're looking at the Scandinavian or the Nordic countries, they all share this vision that a good society is a society where people are more equal. And of course, there's our left wings and there are right wing people, and we are discussing, we are fighting, and so forth. But nobody will say we don't want a welfare state. We can discuss how it's going to be paid for, but we want it because everybody feel more safe, and you can have an easier life, I think. And it also means that reformism has been part of our upbringing. We know things are changing in schools, in education, in society. Everywhere things are changing. And therefore competences like creativity and innovation are highly in demand. And it's not a new thing. It has been like that for generations. And the aim is that we can have an economical, socially, and environmentally stable society in the future. And to reach this goal, I think the education system, where it's not only important to study content knowledge, but also important to be trained as a good citizen. And being trained as a good citizen is not just knowing how to vote and who to vote for, but it's just as much a lifestyle. It's a way of including each other. And for example, my boss, she always tells her staff, more brains thinks better than one brain. And so this idea that you should listen to the other and take in the minorities in a classroom or in any context, the community context. It is really something very fundamental. And of course, this has to be learned. It's a hard lesson. And therefore, Act 1 in the Danish law for primary education, and primary education is the first 10 years in Denmark, it says the folkeskole must prepare pupils for participation, joint responsibility, rights and duties in a society of freedom and democracy. Schoolwork must therefore be characterized by intellectual freedom, equality, and democracy. So each teacher is actually supposed to have this in mind when they are planning their regular lessons. And that means we will take time off for learning students to discuss and to solve disagreements and to take initiatives and learn to be a good citizen. And you can say, in some respect, we come out fine. There is this international research done about how 14 years old students know what they know about democracy and a democratic way of living. And the Nordic student, they came out with the best score. Danish, we won a little. And we also did it in 2008. But Taiwan, they were also doing almost as well. Yes, you can say they listened, they learned what it means to be a democratic society. But even though they have done that, I'm not really certain. I think they lack self-efficiency, because to be a child growing up in a society where individualism has reached it is frenetic. It's saturated individualism. And it's part of the Western idea of how you should be raised to have all these choices, and there are just too many choices for many students to take. And even though you make choices, it's not always easy to see which choices are the right ones. And so that is giving a kind of confusion to many young people. On one hand, they have a lot of skills, which is good to be innovative and creative. And I will try to exemplify this by a little story. In January, professor from ACE, the Robot Innovation Center here in Tokyo, gave a lecture in a Danish high school. And he was talking about robots and how robots could be integrated as something really attractive and helping people in society. And these young students, they were so motivated by his speak that they made an agreement with their classroom teacher, their design teacher, that they should try to work with robots too. And so they got involved, and as you know, there are a lot of things you need to do when you are developing new products. But all of a sudden, these students also wanted to be better in English, because they didn't know the vocabulary of robot, all the things they needed to explain about robots. So they got the English teachers involved, and they need to have some technical English too. And so that was okay, we do that now. The students need it, the students are motivated. And here in March, just before I left, they finished their pamphlets because they wanted to send it to ACE to tell that, they had tried their best to think how robot could be integrated in the Danish society. And this is possible because we're not working with a curriculum, we're working with aims. That means each classroom teacher has the opportunity, together with his students, to choose how they should proceed. And that means we will have a much more student-centered approach to education that you can have when you have a textbook-based education system with a fixed curriculum. And then this research strategy thinking, it's also something which is started very early. So when these students met the person with the robot, they had already the skill to ask questions, how do we proceed? And that is learned from very early age. Here on the pictures you can see some students. I was doing fieldwork in a school garden in Copenhagen. And these students, they have a small garden, but it's not only about gardening, it's also about the ecosystem. And so here they're studying worms, and that is in second grade. And next Friday they would be studying bees and so forth. And so they learn out of the classroom, and they learn by experimenting. They learn from nature. But to integrate their experiences here in the outdoor learning environment and in the classroom, it really takes very, very experienced teachers. I mean, a textbook is very safe, but when you have all these students with all their different questions and approaches, you need teachers who have context-based pedagogical approaches. It's not enough to know how the worms are living, but you also have to be able to approach it and answer it from the perspective of the students. And I think not all our teachers are so skilled so they can do that. But for me, that is a much better education, and the students, they're much happier about this approach. So do these students also have a vision for the welfare state? I mean, they learn these things we hear nowadays are very good, but do they also have a vision where to go? And that I'm more hesitant about. I'm not so sure about that. And that's why you come in, because I think the Japanese society and the Nordic society has really taken different routes into modernity. And that means our relationship to tradition is really different. I have a picture by a German artist called Amfel Kiefer, and I think it illustrates very well this frenetic Nordic individualism, which makes you live in a bubble. And if you are forced to leave your bubble, then the things look rather gray in your bubble, but also outside. And what I really think is so interesting about Japan, that is, it is so different, strange, seen from a Western point. And I really hope you will keep your strangeness, because your approach to tradition and your approach to life in different ways is, to me, so valuable for our students to experience. I myself learned it from watching how students are learned to be citizens when they are serving lunch at school, and also when they doing after-school activities. This perspective that a human being is never alone, but is always living in relationship. There's always something. A human being is something with a between, and that means there is something else. And this understanding of always being dependent on the other, of other people, of your surroundings, on your history. I think that is really what we can learn from visiting and studying in Japan. So just like Mr. Fukuda, well, it's good to be English speaking. It's probably even better to be a native speaker. But a lot of us will never be native speakers of English, but we can learn to improve our life by meeting people who inspire us to do things and walk into our classrooms, do things in a different way, and by doing that, making us seeing things from another perspective. And in this changing perspective, sometimes you are also able to change your own concepts. And I would like to say that at the end also, I actually think my boss is right. More brains, well-trained, they see more, they understand more, and bring in more perspectives. And that's what I really hope for in the future, that we will be able to do. Thank you.